Hello, listeners. We recorded the main bit of the show in the early stages of the Netherlands-South Africa game, so please forgive us if there's some talk of South Africa being early frontrunners. It was true at the time, I promise. You can find our reaction to that incredible result towards the end of the show. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. Over the next few weeks, we'll be working with Nikon. A few weeks ago, Nikon were kind enough to send me the Nikon Sportstar Zoom binoculars for the England and New Zealand ODIs. Compact, lightweight and boasting Nikon's renowned optical quality with multi-coated lenses for the brightest image with powerful 8 to 24 times magnification range for a continuous up-close view of the game, available in black, dark, blue or white. They genuinely change the in-ground cricket watching experience. You can sort of be your own TV director, zooming in on conversations between the captain and the bowlers, get a close-up of your favourite players. I would highly recommend them. We're offering our listeners a 10% discount with the code WISDEN at checkout. If you follow the link in the podcast description, you'll be able to find those Sport Zoom binoculars and get your pair for next summer today. While the World Cup is starting to bubble up nicely, we've had our first proper upset. The top three is quickly emerging, and we should have a proper fight for at least one of those four semi-final spots. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner and Phil Walker. Katya Witney will be joining me later in the show to talk about South Africa, Netherlands, and a bit about the Proteas campaign so far. Phil, England are not out of the competition just yet, but it's not looking good. They looked not only miles off the front runners on Sunday, but in the game itself, miles off Afghanistan.
Yeah, what total omnishambles of a game that was. Where do you start with it? Perhaps with the skipper, who had a...
Go on. No,
charitably...
Because we didn't talk about him on Sunday.
Right.
And I've seen the
who
criticism...
Who was on Sunday?
Butch and Joe.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And I've seen more criticism for Buttler in the last few days, but we didn't really talk about it on Sunday.
Okay. So I haven't read anything because I've been doing this magazine, so I've been, waylaid with that really. But I watched the game, watched it closely-ish. There's lots of big calls around it, I suppose. Complacency of selection, complacency of preparation, complacency of mistreating the 50-over game, all of that stuff. I can understand all of that. I'm not sure if this feeds into it or not, but my impression was that it was almost a sort of comically bad day for Jos Buttler from the moment that he made the decision in the first place to field first, which I found very surprising anyway.
Worth saying, by the way, Jonathan Trott said...
No, I know. And they said that they wanted to do the same.
Yeah.
To the point where he dropped the first ball, so that went from 1 to 5, and I think he acknowledged actually in the interview afterwards that plays its part in setting the tone. But I thought the selection was safety first and dispiritingly so, and I thought the way that he managed his attack was unfortunate. It got away from them so miserably in the last 5, 6 or 7 overs, and we know how much that impacts on the tone and the mood going into a run chase. And Afghanistan, having been pegged back, in part because of their own misdeeds, to run out Gurbaz, who we'll come to hopefully in a minute because what a player he is, but to run him out when he's got 120 sticking on. So it was almost self-inflicted that they brought England back into the game. But for him to have juggled his bowlers as he did, it just didn't work out for him at all. There were 1 or 2 who didn't bowl through. When you see the final figures of Livingston's 10 overs, 1 for 33, Radil Rashid bowled very nicely as well. And then you think that Moeen Ali's on the bench, and instead you've picked, another medium pacer in Curran, who gave no indication in the first 2 games that he was going to be of any great value in these particular conditions, bowling in 50-over cricket. And yet they went there again. And so it felt to me like a muddled approach, really, perhaps in keeping with how it's felt the whole tournament. Perhaps that's an overstretch, but it certainly didn't look like an England team forged in the identity and the character of Morgan. It felt like sort of tentative and slightly muddled team. The run chase, was it a question of intent? I'm not sure, really. It felt, though, like a real classic or a relic, especially towards the end when, Wokesy's not going to win or lose this game for you, but the notion of sort of just staggering around in the dark against mystery spin that you don't understand, and he wasn't the only one, by the way. Livingston doesn't convince for me at all in the middle order, as I've said before, and various others. They looked like they were second guessing themselves. That there was an inhibition to their stroke play against spinners that they haven't really seen before, and so the whole package looked askew to me. In brackets, I didn't like the presentation of nonchalance. There was a lot of sort of giggling about it, joshing on the boundary edge, backroom staff having a laugh and a joke. It's not funny. It's a World Cup. It's not funny. It's not funny when you're getting embarrassed by teams that are admirable and inspiring in their own way, but still they have been put together on an absolute shoestring compared to the embarrassment of riches that you have at your disposal, and you get schooled by these players, many of whom haven't even really played one-day cricket, such as the wicketkeeper, for example. It's not funny. And it looked smug, and it looked a bit entitled to me. But if anything is guaranteed to focus minds, then it's what we've seen in 2.5 of the first 3 games. It's on the line for them now, but then it was on the line for them 4 years ago. No doubt we'll come to the right makeup of the team in a minute, but I think that's a big question, and it'll be interesting to see how they go with that, because it'll indicate how they see they've gone up to now. Look, it sounds a bit ranty, but it was quite jarring to watch, really, to pick. How many left arm seamers do we have? Is it 3? It's 3.
Three in the squad, 2 played the game.
Yeah, 3 in the squad, and another identikit bowler really waiting on the duty bench, and they're all kind of new ball bowlers that are useful for 2 or 3 overs with the new ball. They can't all do it, right? So it's problematic. It's problematic. And the selection of that squad jarred with me at the time, and it jars with me ever more. To think that you can just go into this thing with a bunch of medium pacers and fall back on your credentials having been built up over the last few years, I'm not sure it really works like that. Now I'm not sure that Liam Dawson's necessarily the answer, but somebody like that, to not have a left arm spinner at all in your team, in your whole 15, jars with me. To have 3 left arm medium pacers, none of whom, with the exception of Topley, look like they really have much to offer on these pitches, jars with me.
Yeah, yesterday I wrote a piece for the website called looking at the maybe underlying factors behind the loss, and there are a few things that I found really surprising. So one, Adil Rashid, obviously one spinner, but Moeen and Livingston between them in the last year had only bowled their full allocation in ODI cricket once. This is a World Cup in India. And their lack of preparation for chasing, I thought, was utterly bizarre. In the last 2 years, England have won an ODI batting second against a full member just once. And that was when they took a second string side to Bangladesh early this year. So John Simpson, who played in that COVID series, has been part of a successful ODI run chase more recently than Joe Root and Johnny Bairstow.
Oh, that's good, yes.
But what was more baffling, England hadn't chased at all in ODIs before this game since the Bangladesh series in March. And they had 4 ODIs against New Zealand. They were sent in the first 3 and then won the toss and decided to have a bat in the 4th. What sort of World Cup preparation is that? Ben, what did you make of the defeat?
Yeah, I think Phil has said a lot of it. It was just especially because you're kind of looking to apportion blame, and with a result like this, you kind of think that, okay, one aspect of the game has had a shocker, and yet England, they didn't bowl well, and yet still kept Afghanistan to a total that should have been chaseable, and then again didn't bat well. And in comparison to 2019, fine, England also had to kind of stumble through that group stage, but they had a plan then. They knew they knew they had a choice to either stick with that plan or to go away from it. I don't think England even quite know what their plan is at the moment, much less have a plan B to tear it up and go to it as well. So you're looking at, and also I guess, we're talking about, team selection, that sort of thing. And Joe mentioned this in the pod on Sunday that sure, you can talk about should it be Sam Curran, should it be Gus Atkinson, but you're kind of that fiddling around the fringe ignores that just like the main players are not delivering quite as they should. I mean, you look at Best at the top of the order, and that there are reasons for this, and a lot of this is not even about blame as such and looking for big underlying reasons, like England are not, I guess, one of the best 3 teams in the world, certainly maybe not one of the best 4 teams, and that's kind of fine. Teams can kind of go up and come down in their life cycles, but like that's why this team is at the end of their life cycles, because players are struggling for form, they're playing other formats, they're struggling through injury and fitness, and that means they're just just so far off the pace, I guess. And that's just what it feels like to me.
And I think it's the number of games that some key players played in the intervening 4 years between World Cups that I find that they didn't have to play so little. So James Vince and Sam Billings have had more ODIs where they've chased since 2019 than Joe Root. I know the schedule is packed, but that England didn't have to go in with such little preparation. Interesting that you talked about Buttler. I was going to talk about this later in the show, sort of comparing England to India a little bit. So Rohit Sharma, this tournament has obviously looked incredible, but he's also sort of communicating his side's game plan through his own batting as well as his own words. And I wonder, with England, Buttler is saying England need to be fearless, but by saying you need to be fearless, that doesn't actually eradicate the fear. You actually need to make people genuinely feel that. And Rohit is clearly doing it. And I'm not sure Buttler is in the same way that Morgan and Stokes will be able to. And I think it's interesting that Buttler talks about being fearless, but the actual team selection couldn't be more fearful almost. Like you're hedging your bets with a player like Sam Curran, who is neither a top 7 batter nor a 10-over banker. And I guess that he doesn't get that message across, even if it is the same message that has worked well before, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. The one sort of crumb of comfort or sukkah for England fans is that it is still relatively early days and it is salvageable. And World Cups have told you that the team that begins a World Cup often doesn't finish a World Cup. England in 2019 were one of the exceptions. Pakistan are obviously the paradigm of that in 92, but it does apply. And
Australia in 99 as well.
Yeah, very much so. So there is still time for them to figure it out. But the foresight didn't shine through when you look at the squad that was picked. I mean, don't forget as well that Brooke wasn't even in that initial 15. So the whole thing has a whiff of muddled thinking about it, really. I think one of the subtexts to what you're talking about regarding players playing is that they don't particularly want to. They don't want to play bilateral ODI series. Mark Nicholas, who's the new president of the MCC and involved now with the MCC World Cricket Committee, was very keen to declare last week, as he slips into the role, that bilateral 50-over series, well, they're done for, thanks very much, because the supernatural power of T20 cricket overtakes them. Well, that is perhaps an attitude that's pervasive in England in particular. Not only do we not schedule that many, but we often put a cobbled together team on the park. And we've all been guilty of this, and I've been guilty of it as well in the build-up to this tournament, talking about how 20-over cricket merges and smudges so much into 50-over cricket, and being quite relaxed about it. Well, what you're seeing on pitches where you can't just close your eyes and tee off because it's a flat one, but you have to think your way around a cricket match. It shouldn't be a light bulb moment, but it's my own poor thinking that's confirmed it, right? But they should be knowing about this, right? It is not the same version of cricket.
I thought the same. Obviously, England's team and squad is very similar to the one that won the T20 World Cup last year. But for example, someone like Sam Curran is a very good ball striker, and I think I would have no problems at all with him batting 7 in a T20 side where you sort of go at 100% from ball one. But in 50-over cricket, when you're coming in potentially in the 30th over and you've got to milk the spinners, that is a completely different job. And someone like Curran isn't a great natural rotator of strike, but he's a very, very good hitter of a ball. Completely different job, even though it's the same on paper.
Same token with the ball. Sam Curran's a very useful bowler for 2 overs at the start and 2 overs at the end. But you're needing to get 10 overs out of him when batters have a degree of control over the situation. And that's where he's ineffectual as it stands. Liam Livingstone's another one. If Liam Livingstone has 25, 30 balls to bat in a T20 game, then he can clear his mind and have a hit, and that's his job. But batting 6 in this team, I mean, hopefully now it will be 7 from here on in, but we can come to that in a minute. Clearly, that's a different requirement. And so, yeah, you're feeling like there's certain players who are in position here on the back of their 20-over form, and we've forgotten that this is actually a far more nuanced and subtle version of the game than the stuff that they've been picked on the back of.
If we're talking about the team, which I guess we are going to, and selections we can make, I feel like before England actually, or before we get to the teams we would pick, it'd be nice to go through, because when we're talking about, you know, teams that start tournaments, rarely finish it, it feels like England need more than, like, you know, Sam Curran out for, you know, Moeen Ali at this point. And I wonder if there is something more radical that could be done, like, and something that they haven't trialed, basically, like something like Joss Buttler opening the batting, say, like, he is a form player, he is a player of pedigree, and if you know, he's the captain as well. If you want to, you know, lead from the front, put out a statement, say, this is how we're going to turn this thing around, what better than him coming out to face that new ball against, you know, Rabada, Ngidi, Janssen, Coetzee, and laying down a marker. And I know that, you know, it's not something that he's really done in ODI cricket before, but maybe that also allows you, you know, perhaps it's, for me, it would be Bairstow that would then maybe slot into the middle order. He's, you know, he's a very good player of spin. England have tried that in T20 cricket with number 4, and it kind of had a mixed success. I wonder if actually it could be a pretty effective thing in ODI cricket, give him a bit of cover, a bit of a platform. He doesn't have to go hard from ball 1 if, you know, he's a little bit out of nick and needs a bit of time to get back into it. Like, but and I'm not saying that's definitely the solution. I'm just saying, like, these are the kind of things that I would like to be hearing almost more discussed, because that, it feels like England's tournament isn't going to hinge on, you know, the quality of their 4th or 5th bowler. It's if they can really be getting the most out of their best players, which doesn't feel like it's quite happening at the moment.
I agree, but I think the quality of the 4th and 5th bowler is also really important.
No, it is important.
Because
Yeah,
that possibly cost England 40 or so runs against Afghanistan. Let's do our either predicted or the 11s that we want for Saturday. It's a huge game. England's tournament isn't over even if they lose this. I was looking at this earlier today. It is possible that England lose 4 games and still get through if the top 3 properly run away with it. But either way, it is a huge game.
So condensing that down then, Yas, essentially, are you getting at the idea that 4 of the 10 are effectively not going to be in the race? They will be kingmakers, but they're not going to make that final 4.
Yeah.
Which leaves
6 teams.
6 teams.
Three
do that, man.
3 of which we think are looking like they've got enough already to almost certainly qualify.
Which leaves what? Australia, Pakistan,
and
England.
And you look at that and you're like, England can do that. You know, this is a side that won the 2019 World Cup. A lot of them are still there. They won a World Cup last year. They lost against Ireland in the World Cup last year and ended up winning it. So England, even when they've done well in the past, they've had games where they've not quite been on it. So when you put it like that, just need to get ahead of Pakistan and Australia. I think neither of whom have looked that great so far this tournament. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that they qualify for the final 4. But either way, huge game. Phil, what would your side for that one be? What changes did you make?
I'd probably only make one change after all that.
Yeah.
I'd bring Stokes in, assuming that he's fit. I'd bring Stokes in for Curran.
Yeah. And you're sticking with Wokes.
And I'm sticking with Wokes, for now. It's so out of character to have seen him lose his length. You know, he bowls with his eyes closed and hits the length. And so it's so out of character that I'm more than happy at this point to give him the benefit of the doubt and to remind myself that, you know, they're functioning human beings and he might be carrying a bit of a niggle or he might be slightly down on confidence. Just because he's a garlanded bowler doesn't mean to say that you're not susceptible to off days, and he's had 2.5 off days, sure, but against South Africa's right-handers, so I'm hoping that Topley nicks off de Kock, who's due a failure, and Topley's useful against left-handers in particular, And then Wokes goes okay against their right-handers and gets the away swinger talking for him. That's my hope. Atkinson would obviously be the option if it wasn't Wokes, and I can totally see the case for that change. I can also see the case to bring Moeen back in because, again, it will be surface dependent. But you'd possibly think that South Africa. In fact, I was going to say that South Africa perhaps would go better against the medium pacers than the spinners, but then Klaassen's in the middle order, and Klaassen's this monster against spin, especially against right arm off spin. So I'd probably hold Moeen back as well. So yeah, after all of that, I'd probably just change Curran for Stokes, at least.
Which is not just a personnel change. That's a change of balance to the side because Stokes isn't bowling at the moment, pushes Livingston down to 7 and Brooke at 5 or 6.
Yeah. So look, as I've said throughout this one, nothing quite works to begin with. We know that, and you can pick holes in whatever scenario, whatever permutation. But my instinct is that England are a batting side, and that's the only way that they can stand a chance here, and that everybody in that middle order is a bit too high. And I would pack the batting and back bowler A to go at 7 and over, as opposed to bowler B who goes at 6.5.
That's the thing, though. When Wokes and Curran are bowling 4 overs each for 87, you might as well just pick one guy who goes for 87.
And this is what I said. This is what I said the other week. And Brooke didn't have any runs at that point, so it didn't really sound like I had any justification to make the point. But I've been convinced that he has to play all along, and the other day confirmed it. It's a gamble, but I mean, like, you can't drop another batter now anyway, right? Who else could you drop? You couldn't bring Stokes in for a Milan or a Bairstow or a Brooke or a Root. So,
Ben, what will you do?
Well, I'd be broadly along the lines of Phil. The only thing in terms of bringing in Wokes, people assume it would have to be Atkinson, and no one mentions David Willey at all, which I get to some point of view because, we're talking about medium paces and there's very few that, are more medium pace than him. But if you're also wanting a guy who's in form, like he is that guy. Like if you stick a couple of cuttles in there, not big ones, like 100 runs, 25 wickets since the last World Cup, he is the best all-rounder in the world in terms of batting average and bowling average.
Statistically.
Sure, but I also think that
he's not a top 7 batter.
No.
And I don't know.
So
I guess
he'd be down at 8 below Livingston, which is good. He bowls as that more than I would say Curran or Wokes at this stage. And then actually, if you're looking for new ball excellence, sure, at its peak, Wokes is obviously better idea cricketer than David Willey, and maybe Sam Curran would be too, but he bowled well in that New Zealand series. He takes new ball wickets, and especially against Africa, that's going to be really key. I think that.
But if you're talking about the New Zealand series, Wokes was unplayable in the New Zealand series.
Sure, yeah.
And Wokes isn't past it as a bowler. We've seen it with red ball and white. He's not past it, but he has had a shocker, no question. That first ball the other day, as I referred to earlier, it's unheard of that Wokes does that kind of thing. So I think he has more than enough credit in the bank. In the end, in a clutch game, and this is one, do you want David Willey bowling 10 overs or do you want Chris Wokes?
On the current form, though, it's difficult.
Fine.
Credit in the bank.
Perhaps that's where you are on it. I lean the other way by nose.
I think it's one of those where England, I think, have to make a call based on what they see in the next few days.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us know how Wokes is going to be on Saturday. No way would I have predicted after how he bowled against New Zealand that we'd still be talking about Wokes' form 2 games on. I think it has to be based on, are they seeing positive signs in the week? Because the pitch map that they showed during his spell on Sunday, I've never seen him like that. It's not just he's missing his length a bit, it's sort of all over the place. So I think they have to do it on what they see during the week. But yeah, obviously.
So which way are you going as of now?
I know that's sitting on the fence, but I would base if there are positive signs that he's finding his length again with a brand new ball, then I'd stick with Wokes. If not, I'd go Atkinson. I think Atkinson got picked because he's good with the new ball against good players. He's good at the death against good players, and then weirdly against New Zealand did neither of those things in the warm-up series. I think it's the aggressive option.
I agree. Yeah,
it's the aggressive option. He's quick, and South Africa have got the most informed top 6 in the tournament, and I think he's got something that David Willey doesn't have. And sort of, why do you pick him in the squad if when you've got two bowlers out of form and it's a must-win game against a really good batting lineup, you're not playing him.
I guess the only thing there is that we know how good the South African lineup is against pace in particular. Like, or basically any other team, I think I would buy that logic. But South Africa, they might almost prefer that pace and a guy who was like properly swinging it with that new ball. Like I can see De Kock. I mean, like, I can see all number of things, but I can see De Kock absolutely smashing Atkinson back faster than it came from, and I can see him nicking off to a sort of floaty 4-1 that swings away from the bat, or that takes in surge and goes onto the stump. So I think I would be with you. I think, but you're almost talking from a position of safety there, and I can still see some arguments for batting depth, even if batting the specialists. So as a compromise, almost with that, and bearing in mind if Wokes tears it up in training in the nets, fine, go back with him. But if not, I would be favouring Willie over Wokes, but I would admire them for picking Atkinson, but I think I would understand it if they weren't to choose that as well.
For me, it is the opposition that shades it for Wokes. I think to bring Atkinson in again, as Ben rightly says, bring Atkinson in against the side that play the quicks well and climb into the quicks. Look, he might have a day out, but it could get heavy for him. And I'm just backing Wokes' pedigree and class, at least up until this weekend. But things change, right? Things change around. So we all agreed then now that there's no question that a batter makes way.
For me, no. I think especially the way Brook played in that run chase, he was the only one who sort of managed it well. He's the only one who's brave enough to take on the short boundary. He's batted in the way I think England want the side to throughout the tournament, even when he's not got runs.
They're also in the slightly frustrating position of the batting lineup not quite firing as one, and yet everyone having done sort of something. Like Milan makes that big 140, Bairstow makes a 50 in the same game. Roots made a couple of useful 70 odds.
But Buttler is the one.
Same game.
Buttler is the one who hasn't arrived yet, and yet he's England's great player. So there are reasons to still be cautiously, flakily cheerful.
Yeah, I'd quite like. With Brook, it also does allow Stokes and Buttler to just return to where they've always batted when England have been good. Butler's actually played quite a lot of ODI cricket at 5, and for whatever reason, it's not really worked.
So you go Brook 4, Stokes 5.
Brook 4, Stokes 5, Buttler 6.
I agree.
I think that just looks more imposing
Massively
than what
so.
They've got at the moment.
Massively so. A good comparison is the South Africa side, right? They pick, as far as I can see, they pick 6 batters, 5 bowlers. They don't twat around with any bet hedging. They just say, right, there's our 6 best players. Got Janssen, I think, at 7, who's a useful lower order player, but he's in as a bowler, and that's that. He's in as a bowler. It's a brilliant way of doing it. No mucking about. England are trying to alleviate their weaknesses, right? Which is not a very Morgan era England way of going about things. I think they've just got to back themselves here. They've got to play 6 proper batters, back the bowlers that they've picked, give Liam Livingstone the pump up and say, look, you are a really good bowler in these conditions. And I think he is.
Yeah, I think he is.
I think he genuinely is. So don't have him in there as a stopgap or as an alternative. Foreground the bloke. And obviously play Harry Brook. Obviously. He's one of the world's best young players, one of the world's best players, full stop. It's not his fault he hasn't played 50 over cricket. He's an absolute genius. So play him.
Obviously, it's a huge win for Afghanistan, just their second in World Cup cricket. They've been threatening to do something like this in the past, but this time their batters gave them just enough to work with. But their spin attack is probably the second best in the tournament, right? After India, it's probably them. And for a World Cup in India, that's quite handy.
It really is. And I suppose when we're talking about the semi-final race, the fact that England and Australia particularly have looked beatable, like you're looking at teams, you've got 3 unbeaten teams, you've got Pakistan who've lost 1 game, and everyone else has lost at least 2 games. So actually, Afghanistan are in, no better or worse position than other teams. Okay, the teams they've lost to, that holds them back a little bit. But if they can pull off more upsets, then at least they can maybe be in contention around that. And that the same goes for, say, Bangladesh. Probably Sri Lanka with 3 losses is going to be a bit harder for them. But like the fact that Australia and England are properly struggling, those teams should be looking at them like, actually, if there's going to be any point, it is now, even though it's still unlikely. And as we saw, and they won that game while shooting themselves in the foot a bit, right? Like Gurbaz getting run out since been reprimanded by the by the ICC for smashing his bat against a chair because he felt I was on for 150 there probably because that's what he does. He gets hundreds and big hundreds, as does his opening partner Ibrahim Zadran. I could see them doing something similar against Australia, say, who have Sri Lanka put on a big opening partnership against them. Afghanistan could do the same, and they get a big total, and then their spinners get to work again. Like, why couldn't a side like Afghanistan and Bangladesh make a run? Obviously, lots of reasons, but just maybe wouldn't it be great if we're not sitting here at the end just talking about those who are like, actually, if Afghanistan win these two games, then they'll be tied on net run rate, whatever. So.
It would be marvellous, and they seem to have a bit more sort of spunk and vim about them than Bangladesh do. Bangladesh often seem a bit.
You can watch Afghanistan. You can watch
stage fright, right?
You can watch
on the main.
You can
stage.
see even when Afghanistan were winless in 2019, you could see how they could beat the top teams. My worry for them is just that their middle order is really weak.
Sure.
It's really, really weak. But they've got two proper openers, which they didn't have last time.
On him,
Ramanola.
Yeah, glorious, right?
Amazing innings.
So what a career he may have ahead of him. He's 21, I think.
As is his opening partner. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Gurbaz looks like the slightly more superior player at the moment, but two kids, everything in front of them. I hope that he's already played in the IPL, but hopefully he can play all over the world here. He's glorious to watch. And if he, Devon Conway and Joe Root are top scorers in their respective teams, then I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams.
And I wonder, looking at Afghanistan's success, that England and Australia actually have missed a trick in not really valuing finger spin that highly. No Moeen for that Afghanistan game, and unless Livingston's bowling a left-hander, there wasn't any for England in that game. And already this tournament, we've seen a fair few orthodox finger spinners do decently. Santner, Jadeja, Shakib, Nabi against England. Mahedi had a decent game early on. Maharaj too.
Livingston
as well when he's bowling to the left hand. Yeah, 100%. Anyway, on the world's biggest stage, there is no hiding place. To some, it is a blur. To others, everything comes into sharp focus. This is the time to seize the moment, paying attention to every detail. What looks effortless is actually born out of diligence, both in sport and in life.
And in podcasts.
This is the time to step up to the plate. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. Congratulations to Ikram Ali Kil, who won this week's Charles Tyrrett. Cometh the hour, moment of the week for his half century for Afghanistan against England. It's an amazing story. So as we've established, Afghanistan's batting outside their opening pair hasn't done a lot in ODI cricket, not just in recent times, but sort of throughout all times. So Ikram comes in for Najibullah, and it's just his second international game in 4 years. He doesn't play T20 cricket, let alone in the big leagues. He doesn't really play that at all. He doesn't play Test cricket. He hasn't played ODI cricket since 2019, with the exception of one warm-up game heading into this tournament. And it was an absolutely essential knock, because as good as Ramanola was, that Afghanistan innings was threatening to fizzle out. But Ikram held it together, got one really nasty blow of Mark Wood, but was very brave in facing the pace of Wood. Eventually gets them up to 284 rather than the 220 odd they looked like getting, and ultimately that proved pivotal. Over the course of the World Cup, we're once again working with our loyal friends at Charles Tyrrett. Get in on the Dapper action this autumn with 20% off using the promo code WICKET20 at checkout. Phil, Abhishek, not our Abhishek, but one of the listeners called Abhishek asked, I just want to hear Phil talk about Rohit. Rohit was not just against Pakistan, but throughout the tournament he always looks good, but he looks even better now.
All right, so you warned me about this, and I came in on the train and I speed wrote some nonsense. All right, about Rohit the poet. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, 100%.
About Rohit the poet, the Magus of Maharashtra, our very own Bard of the Blade. You ready for this, Ben?
I've put my microphone down in anticipation.
I'll be dropping mine at the end of this. The boy who makes it all make sense. The only cricketer out there whose gifts are so extreme and alien that the only reasonable human response to them is to be embarrassed and to smile and shrug. like an adolescent who's more concerned about the smokes he lost on his way to school than the A+ he's just got achieved in his life drawing class. And on that, by the way, pause that shot. You know the shot I'm talking about, the pulled shot, pick up revelation shot with the cocked ankle and the heel. Pause that shot, the one we've all seen 1,000 times, and new and afresh, and it's a gasping juicer every time. And get Vermeer on the easel, get him on the easel and let him go at it. That cocked front foot is enough. You could open a gallery on the back of it. They talk of cultured left feet in football. Well, this one could write a Russian novel every other Sunday. Look, it's hilarious. It's a real side splitter that he's captain of India. And a deeply good one, and a skillful one at that, by the way, with a weirdly sort of relatable common touch. He's a democratizing force somehow in that setup. And that he should follow what I've written here, the volcanic majesty of his pal and alter ego. It's like replacing Pablo Escobar as the head of cricket's greatest cartel with Pablo Picasso. Actually, no, Pablo Neruda, our maestro of verse. Do you know Pablo Neruda?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Good. It's like replacing with Pablo Neruda, not Pablo Picasso, our master of verse, whose beauty is so pure and outrageous that it leaves a void because, like everything, it's unique and mortal and fleeting, but still so meaningful. It almost makes me want to see India win the thing. Almost.
Beautifully done. All on the train from
10 minutes, yeah, from Penjis to Brixton.
fantastic.
Easy to do, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
He just gives it to you on a plate, time after time.
I obviously know who Pablo Neruda is. Neruda is for those.
The great Valparaisan Chilean love poet. There's a film called The Postman, Il Postino, based around Neruda's love poetry and loosely his story, autobiographical story of the time that he lived in the hills of Italy. And it's one of the most beautiful films ever made. And I actually visited his house in Chile when I was down there a few years back. Pablo Neruda, there you go. Did you really know him, Ben, or were you just being even more pretentious than me?
No, I did. I was going to say this is going to turn into quite a Chile-heavy podcast because we're going to discuss their women's team a bit later.
Are we doing it? Are we doing it? Is that on the list?
Yes, on the list.
I looked at that scorecard for probably hours on Sunday afternoon or Monday afternoon.
But there's loads of scorecards because they played
We are going to get to this later.
You know, we have to get them on. We have to speak to some people from the Chile team. Anyway, come to that later.
Yeah. Ben, back to Pakistan, India, which was slightly bigger than Chile, Argentina.
Steady.
Derbyshire and Pakistan's Mickey Arthur said it didn't seem like an ICC event, to be brutally honest. It seemed like a bilateral series, a BCCI event. I didn't hear Dil Pakistan coming through the microphones too often tonight. What did you make of that and the overall spectacle? It's obviously a World Cup held in India, but this is a massive game wherever a World Cup is held, and it did feel not like it does when it's held elsewhere.
Well, yeah, and there's so much this way you're trying to parse what is incompetence and what is a show of soft power from the BCI basically, and because this isn't just about any game the hosts play, the home fans are going to be there's going to be more of them than there are touring fans, which is fine. That's partly why you host a World Cup. But then you look at the other games that have been played and why are there no fans there or very few, and there are lots of reasons for that. Not that many of which have to do with India, Pakistan, political goings on. I was wondering if I could buy a ticket for India, England, which is on the 29th of October, so that's in 12 days' time, on bookmyshow.com. Tickets for that are coming soon. So
you're joking, man.
No, I'm not. No, so if you're an England fan,
is this an official betting?
This is the official ticket booking site for the tournament. Yeah. So
bloody hell.
if you're an England fan, think you know what? That's the game that is going to make or break England's World Cup campaign. Even now, you're like, oh wow, I've actually got a spare $3,000 in the bank. I'm going to go and get some flights and a hotel, and then actually think there's no guarantee if I get them I'm even going to be able to go because I can't even buy a ticket even now. I mean, that is a big part of the reason why I know travelling fans. Another big part of the reason is the difficulty of Pakistan fans securing visas from Pakistan. I mean, journalists couldn't even get them early in the tournament. The head of the PCB couldn't get visa for his family to go out there to watch some of the games. And then what other things of incompetence? So they had this massive sort of opening ceremony for this game. They didn't have an opening ceremony for the tournament, but they had an opening ceremony for India, Pakistan. Loads of Bollywood show tunes. Then they realised a few days before the game, oh wait, we can't broadcast this. We'd actually have the the broadcasting rights for any of these songs. So we'll just do this for the fans in the stadium. But then you get to them not playing, the unofficial anthem of the Pakistan team, and you're like, well, that would be played if it was a World Cup in England. Like, you would have heard it in the stands at the 2019 World Cup, and why is that not being played? And I think it is a fair question to ask. So yeah, there's lots that has been not ideal about the hosting of this World Cup, and I would say that only some of it is down to active shows of power from the BCI. I mean, going even to yesterday, when you have a bit of the ICC branding with some scaffolding falling onto the stands below because of strong winds, fine, but you'd hope that an international cricket stadium could withstand a bit of a gust. And if those stands had been full, it could have been pretty nasty. Thankfully, no tickets have been sold. They were able to run away from the stands as it fell below.
Obviously, India are the standout side in the tournament so far.
By miles.
Bumrah was incredible once more.
Obviously, South Africa have played really well as well. But if you look at the India team, they've got the best openers, the best middle order, the best bowling all-rounder, the best seamer, and the best spin attack. So they'll probably lose in the semi-finals. But what a team.
This is the thing.
What a team.
They're arguably doing too well because Pandya and Jadeja aren't getting a bat. And you know what? They might need to in an important game, and they wouldn't have batted for 6 weeks.
Yeah, but even that doesn't quite hold as true because they were 2 for 3 against Australia and still walked home on the back of their middle order, right? So they at least have, it's only Kerr Hall who knew was good, but he has at least had a test in a pressure circumstance and come through it with absolutely flying colours. So even that, they can be a little bit more secure on.
And Hardik Pandya, not overburdened by self-doubt, is he?
No.
that lad. Bloody hell. He bowled really sharp, by the way, in that game.
Yeah.
Late 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate the clock is, but
I think
he was sharp.
I think apparently he was talking about in the week leading up to the game, this is going to be the fastest I bowled, that kind of thing, and he lived up to it.
As I say,
again, fair play.
Beset.
Fair play.
With midnight angst.
It's almost a show of just complete bravado that they pick Shardul Thakur and then he just basically doesn't bowl and doesn't bat in that Pakistan game. Everyone else takes 2 wickets apiece because, why would he be bowling over Hardik Pandya? And
when I watch India, I sort of think, how is any team supposed to compete with this in a World Cup, let alone a World Cup in India? That they're just full of total, almost superhuman superstars who just have different lives to other cricket players. They are gods in India and are used to playing in these sort of cauldrons all the time, and there's so much pressure on them.
Which is why it's all the more amazing that Rohit holds the whole thing together, right?
And that they're going to lose against England in the semi-finals.
I don't think they're going to lose against England. Might lose against someone else.
Afghanistan, maybe. Yeah.
Just on India, Pakistan, there was a commentary stint from Sachin that rivaled Hayden's at the end of South Africa, Australia. So he spent a good 5 minutes talking about a pre-match breakfast he once had 30 years ago, I think whilst Rizwan was going really well. And then he ended his stint basically by shitting on ODI cricket, saying that it didn't work as well as it used to. And for a guy who doesn't give that many opinions, I thought it was brilliant timing to share this opinion.
What did he say?
During an ODI World Cup. So he suggested that ODI should be played in 4 innings of 25 overs, where a team has 10 wickets across 2 separate 25 over innings. The idea being that the teams then have a more even use of the conditions across the game, which sort of makes sense.
Yeah, this is also his only opinion, right? And he has held this for a really, really long time. So he first, the earliest record I could find of him expressing this was back in 2009. So when he was still actually playing. And he said he thought of it in 2002 during a Champions Trophy final that was played twice over 2 days. Had way more than 100 overs played across the 2 days and didn't reach a result because the playing conditions said they had to restart the game the next day if you used the reserve day. But he thought then, this reserve day might be if we restart on the reserve day, restarting the game yesterday, that would be unfair because the conditions would be so different. So why not just have it split up? And that's just been the thing that has utterly gripped him since then. And he, all the other things that, Sachin could come out and, demand a test cricket fund, say, to fund the smaller nations, or could come out and, say that, we must democratize the game and expand or diminish the power of this or that. But no, it's ODI cricket, split the innings in half, that is the thing that Sachin Tendulkar believes above all else. And, he clearly does believe it because he's stuck by it for so long.
We've always got an eye on the big prize, haven't we, here? So you put the boot in on Tendulkar. I compared Kohli to Pablo Escobar. So, I'm not sure this podcast is going to last a week at this point.
We compared Sachin to the Queen last week. What do you reckon the Queen's one opinion was?
Do you know, when we had that conversation as well, we still spoke about her in the present tense. Did you notice that?
Yeah. I wonder what that says.
Yeah.
Something about TV, that maybe David Tennant was the best doctor, something like that.
Didn't expect you to utter those words when we started recording. Anyway, Pakistan have a crucial game against Australia on Friday, and they have to navigate that potentially without a couple of players who are currently battling viral infections. Abdullah Shafiq is reportedly one of them.
Lasagna Gate.
Lasagna Gate. Just a reminder that I'm doing the daily bit of the show with Katya later on. So we're going to do a bit on South Africa, Netherlands, but also on South Africa's tournament so far. Mike asks, what will the first close game be? Will we get a close game? I want a thriller. #Strum. Pakistan Sri Lanka was a close game.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it's tricky because England Afghanistan was close in its own way. It didn't feel done until the 9th wicket fell. Right, you still felt that England were just about clinging on, and then the margin is big, and it's not a thrilling finish as such, but it's tense all the way through the game, even though the ending is it ends before it might have done. So and I think there's been lots to enjoy in this tournament, even without a proper threat. But it could really do with some. I mean, 2019 had quite a few by this point already, and even before the final, you had several games that ranked among the proper great ODIs. Just think back to West Indies, New Zealand, when Carlos Brathwaite took them so close. That semi-final between New Zealand and India as well. The tournament could do with just 2 or 3 in the space of 4 or 5 days to really be okay, it's here. But,
Pakistan Australia could be the one. Absolutely huge game. The first game between those 3 sides that we think are most likely to be challenging for that.
When's that?
Friday.
And England South Africa the day after.
Yeah. Cricket 24 is the culmination of a decade of cricket video game development and includes teams from every corner of the globe. Players will be able to take on major cricket nations, including Australia and England in the Ashes, West Indies, New Zealand, Ireland, and more. Plus, for the first time ever, professional Indian T20 teams, all set in over 50 detailed official stadia. Cricket 24 is the most complete video game simulation of cricket seen to date. The game is out now, and you can order at bigant.com. Elsewhere, Alastair Cook has announced his retirement from the professional game. Didn't come as a huge shock, but 74 first-class hundreds, 33 Test hundreds, carried on for 5 full summers after his England retirement. Obviously in England, great, but seeing him do his thing for Essex has been a wonderful sight. Phil, I remember you wrote a very good piece during the Bob Willis Trophy final in the COVID year, talking about how we sort of unfairly boxed Cook as an overly limited player, but actually when he returned to county cricket, we got to see just actually how complete a player he was and how he actually had a lot more shots than we probably gave him credit for.
Yeah, he said in his very long and actually quite moving and very fulsome statement as he was throwing the garlands across the stage, he said he just had an amazing amount of fun in the last 5 years, and he described it as 5 bonus years from the time he retired, obviously at the Oval from England, played 5 full summers for England, for Essex. And he says the 2019 championship win was up there with his most rewarding and proudest moments as a player. And I totally believe that. And I've never quite got this idea that, if you're really good and you've made lots of test match runs and all the rest of it, then you get to a certain point, and as soon as you don't have to play cricket anymore, then you're out of there. Because it feeds this idea that players don't really want to play unless they have to. Well, perhaps some of them do just enjoy it. And why wouldn't Cook enjoy the thing he was put on this earth to do for a little bit longer? And I think that's what happened, what he's gone for over the last few years. So it's never surprised me, really, that he sticks at it. Essex built him and helped to make him. And it's not a case of him repaying their faith, but he's among the people that he identifies with. You know, Gooch is his mentor and his coach and his dear friend, as he says in his statement. Gooch is there every week at Chelmsford. Trust me, he is literally there. Keith Fletcher's there. He grew up with Wesley in the youth teams and so on. These are his people. So why wouldn't he want to play county cricket? Beautiful way to go, nicking off to Ben Sanderson, a little 75-mile-an-hour away ducker, nicking off at the end of a dead game in Wantage Road. It's perfect, absolutely exquisite. You couldn't go a better way.
He went pretty well when he was over here.
But you can't have both, right? You can't replicate that in county cricket.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. You had the two sides of the same coin, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, you mentioned the Lords thing. That was a weird week. It was the ground was maddened by plague dread. It was COVID times, and he made 172, and I remember it clear as day. And he was unshackled from the England stuff. The flag wasn't on his shoulders, pulling him down anymore. Unburdened by all that kind of expectation and patriotism and all the nonsense around opening the batting for England, and he just went out and played, and they had a good attack. Craig Overton was bowling fast, basically in October, and he was unbelievable, untouchable, liberated just to play. And that's been his story overall for the last 5 years. It's fallen away a little bit for him. 2019 and 2020, he averaged 50 plus. Fallen away a bit since then, but he's still made, I think, 3 championship hundreds this year. Goes out on his own terms. And you know, just last is a one-off, last of a dying breed, really, to be honest. You know, because you're never going to get a cricketer like him again. By definition, you're not going to get a cricketer like him again, who is start, finish, and end a red ball opening bat. Just not going to exist again.
Probably never see someone overtake 74 first-class hundreds. Obviously, loads of people have got way more, but you can't see that happening anytime soon.
I don't know. Ben, anyone?
No, because you sort of think, is Pujara close? And he's not that close, basically. He'd need to go at like 4 or 5 year for quite a long time to overtake him. So, and then, beyond that, how does it happen?
Unless you get a red ball specialist from India, England, Pakistan or Australia, I guess.
Or someone who somehow manages to like switch between a couple of competitions, a bit like how Simon Harmer has really, really racked up first-class wickets recently because he was doing a bit in South Africa, right? Is that right? So he was, so you're absolutely plundering in like 2 competitions, because that's the other thing is that, if you might think, there might be a guy who's just county cricket, but England, he's too slow for England, so they don't pick him, then he just gets, 600s a year in county cricket. But to get, to maintain that for the 14 years you'd need or whatever it would be to get up near to Cook also seems pretty unlikely. So
an England Lions touring group was announced this morning for a 3-week trip to the UAE. 21 players were named. They are Rehan Ahmed, George Balderson, Shoaib Bashir, Josh Bohannon, Bryden Cast, Jack Carson, James Coles, Josh DeCares, Matt Fisher, Tom Hartley, Lyndon James, Tom Laws, Dan Mousley, Callum Parkinson, Matthew Potts, Rishi Patel, Ollie Price, James Rue, Ollie Robinson, Josh Tongue, John Turner. Ben, it's an interesting mix. Quite a few guys who you'd say are properly next in line to the test setup, but also others who are England are probably just having a look at for the first time. Any names in there that particularly caught your eye?
Well, as a theme, I guess it's the untried and unknown spinners, I suppose, like Shoaib Bashir, who Somerset are really excited about, but makes his debut this summer, hasn't torn up any trees. There's been, a couple of social media clips where he looks quite good, looks like he's got a nice action, but he's right into a Lions squad. Same with Josh DeCares, who we talked about, son of Michael Atherton, basically only took up spin bowling this year, was a proper part-time when he took, 7 for earlier in the summer, then takes another 8 for later on, but that sometimes happens for part-timers, and yet England must be now looking at him as, at least a possible spinner at the top level, which is, I guess it shows how quickly you can rise if you do something that no one else does, but also kind of how precarious your status can be when you think about some of the guys who aren't in there, who were previously sort of flavours of the month. And I just quite like that Rishi Patel's in there, because it's been a nice story over the past couple years, deemed surplus to requirements at Essex, having, played the odd knock there, but not much else. Leicestershire is, I wrote this in the magazine actually, that we talk a lot about Leicestershire as a place where, academy products come up and then move on to other clubs. It's a place like First Chances basically, and then they go to Notts or somewhere else. But actually it serves just as valuable a role for players who need a second chance or a last chance basically. And Rishi Patel is the perfect example of that. It was brilliant last season, hundreds in all three formats, 400s in the county championship, tops 1,000 runs, and it's absolutely right that he should be in there. And it's a vindication for Leicestershire as well, who had a brilliant season and are doing some really good things.
I'd like to pick out James Coles at Sussex. He's someone that people in the county game really talk up. 19-year-old all-rounder. I know England have been interested in his left arm spin, but as a batter that I think players are more excited about him. Phil, anyone in particular that stood out for you?
Not really. I'm glad to see Ollie Price in there. He's a favourite of mine for no evident reason. Just like watching him play, did really well in the 50 over stuff. Ollie Robinson's a brilliant cricketer. The other Ollie Robinson's a brilliant cricketer. And if you're looking at post Bairstow Test match gloveman options, then obviously the blue-eyed boy here at the Oval. But behind him, or perhaps in front of him, who can say? Ollie Robinson and James Rew are both in this squad, and they are probably the heir apparents for that gig, you would think. And Robinson, James Rew, there's a lot of stuff around him, but he's very, very young. Robinson's been around the traps for a few years. Obviously went up to Durham. He's had an unbelievably good year, and he's a really brilliant keeper bat. And
suits the way England currently play more so than Rew does.
Just one more thing on the spin thing.
Yeah.
It surprised me that this was Callum Parkinson's first Lions call-up. You'd have think he's been, one of the standout finger spinners in the county championship for a little while. But that is potentially, he is, I guess, one of the spinners with more of a record in that group, and England might well need a few of them for that tour of India. And you're going to, if you impress the right people on this, then that's how you get into that group. So that's interesting as well. There's not going to be much to actually follow from this group. I think it is just a training camp, isn't it? You might get a few sort of practice game scorecards, which so we might not be able to glean loads of this from the outside, but yeah, that's one as well, I suppose.
And worth saying that it isn't a England B team. There are players in that squad who England are just looking at for the first time, players who might not have played under 19s cricket. So almost you don't want to big them up too much or say they're as close to England as you might think because they're in this group. Elsewhere, it has been officially confirmed that cricket will be in the 2028 LA Olympics. If you want to hear our thoughts on that, go back to our last weekly episode because I don't think we have anything to add on that this week. And a few world records, two in particular actually. So Argentina piled on 427 for one in a T20 against Chile. 73 extras in that total. One bowler bowled an over that went for 52 in an over that contained 17 no balls. A solid 364 run win there for Argentina.
Are we discussing the merits of this game, or we
can do?
I guess there's two things to separate, right? Well, Phil, you were all about talking about this earlier, and then have you lost energy? I don't know. But people talk about this.
His response was priceless.
I guess people talk about this because this is now a T20I record. This is an official game, and some people really care a lot about this. And I am not one of those that cares from that point of view. I don't really feel like the sanctity of records is such if something is a sanctioned international game. I was just looking at the list of top scorers in football, international football history, and you've got the likes of Messi, Ronaldo in the top. You also got Sunil Chetri of India in fourth place, and may well rise up. And no one.
We've
really...
had a go at Kohli in this podcast. We had a go at Sachin, and now you have a go at the record.
I'm saying it's great that he's up there, and I don't mind it. I suppose the other thing is, and this is something you just have to ask the Chile team is what have they learned from getting absolutely pumped in a 3-match series as well, all of which Argentina scored over 300 runs in, and all of which were no balls, a key factor in them scoring all of those runs. You wondered how ready this team is just to be playing this level of international cricket, but I don't think that you don't want to conflate the two things, that this is an international game and should be treated as such, and also the general state of Chilean cricket, which I'm not an expert on. The other scorecard from the game was in the third game when Chile made 22, of which there were 21 extras.
I think for me, just you don't like seeing mismatches full stop. And talk about in club cricket when you have two teams play against each other that are miles apart. It's not fun for anyone. I think on a very basic level, I don't like it for that reason. I think that people who are saying, it shouldn't have international status, I think they're sort of missing the point. I just don't think it should be playing each other. And in Pakistan, there was a first-class game between Lahore and Multan that saw 6 players from Multan score hundreds in the same innings, which is an all-time joint all-time record. 8 out of the first 12 batters to bat in this game scored hundreds. So 718 for 8, played 570, 8 for 6 in a ball draw. Poor old Zahid Mahmood, remember him? Playing the Rawalpindi Test match against England last year, went for 2 for 173 off his 57 overs. So it's a long, not day, couple of days in the dirt. Phil, do you have an update on Karl Marx and sport?
No.
But you nearly did.
I did receive a tweet from a chap whose name is Matt.
Go,
you make me sick.
Moving on, the Nightwatchman podcast is back for Series 2. 8 brand new episodes brought to you by John Houghton and Jim Wallace. The new series features an array of the most respected, interesting and popular voices in cricket. There's Jack Russell, Paul Collingwood, Adam Voges, Zafar Ansari, Nick Compton, Nathan Lehman, Andy Zaltzman. In typical Nightwatchman fashion, there are contributors from other walks of life, including the award-winning author Anthony McGowan, William Fiennes and Richard Beard, the writer and former England selector Ed Smith, journalist Emma John, gambling expert Ed Hawkins and the historian James Holland. It's a cricket podcast unlike any out there. The 8 episodes each have a distinct theme with subject matters including failure, fielding, retirement, the legend of 99.94 selection, the IPL, wicket-keeping and war. More than 8 hours worth of engaging, enlightening and entertaining cricket-related discussion. The series is a great listen for anyone who enjoys the game's rich history, its culture, and some more thought-provoking questions. The entire second series is available, as well as the first, which includes stuff with Tom Holland, Tim Key, Michael Atherton, Tanya Aldred, Gideon Haigh, and many more. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. And I know there's a lot of cricket podcasts coming your way at the moment. So in between our daily episodes, maybe, or just after each of our daily episodes, you can listen to some of the Nightwatchman podcast that is out and available now. Phil, we've not really talked about the Nightwatchman for a while, but it's the Wisden Quarterly, and it's excellent podcast brought to you by 2 brilliant cricket people in John and Jim.
Indeed, yeah. As you say, it's a quarterly collection of long form writing, so no subject is off the table as long as it has a kind of spiritual or sometimes tenuous link to cricket. But it's a space for brilliant writers to express themselves, really, and you don't get too many opportunities these days. So it's a really powerful piece of work that comes out, as you say, on a quarterly across the year. Jim and John put it together. John in particular, he narrates them. I listened to one actually coming in this morning, the one with Nick Compton that you mentioned on retiring, with Compton and Zafar Ansari, and it's very discursive and reflective and quite introspective. It has a feel of a sort of Radio 4 Sunday afternoon show. And John,
he's got a great voice for it.
Well, John,
great voice for it.
Whispering John, he just lilts over you. If you're feeling down, in life, and you just need to free your mind of the clutter, stick on one of these late at night, and just listen to John just say stuff like England's greatest Test match away wins, and it just makes you feel better. He has a beautiful way. He's obviously a masterful scribe anyway, and look, these are brilliant. They are truly, truly brilliant, and they are kind of unique as well. They're also going really well. Apparently, they were sort of top of the charts recently this week. So Go and listen to them.
Well, I was going to say on John's voice, there's something that the producers do on Radio 4 where they put cat ears on the microphone and tell you to speak into it as if you're talking to your beloved pet cat, basically. and John has the voice of a man perpetually talking to a beloved pet. I think it's just lovely to listen to, even if you kind of like tune it out and fall asleep to it, or listen intently. I think do the first and then do the second, maybe. Yeah.
You can find the Nightwatchman podcast wherever you found this one, probably. That's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll hear from Katya on South Africa, Netherlands, and the Proteas campaign so far. Following an incredible Ashes series this summer, England are touring India early next year for a 5-test series. Watching cricket in India is something everyone should do, and the country is a magical place to visit. The first test is in Hyderabad, which is the ideal gateway to discovering India, and the final test is in the stunning city of Dharamshala in the foothills of the Himalayas, which you'll see during the World Cup. If you're curious about combining the cricket with some of the very best that India has to offer, Experience Travel Group are the experts in tailor-made holidays to Asia. With tickets secured, rooms in the best boutique hotels, and an unmatched network of local guides to look after you at the cricket and beyond, a dream holiday is waiting for you. To build your adventure, go to experiencetravelgroup.com and click Get in Touch or call them directly on 0203 993 5153. This tournament really is coming alive. Netherlands beat South Africa by 38 runs in Dharamshala to throw the race for the semi-finals wide open. There was all the chat after the Afghanistan-England result was, is this one of the all-time great World Cup upsets? But this one surely trumps it. Katya, that was a truly brilliant performance from the Dutch. They were 112 for 6 in this rain-affected 43-over game. They end up on 245. And then they silenced the in-form batting lineup of the whole tournament so far. Just exceptional.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, wasn't it? I think we all kind of, before the match, I don't think anyone really had the Dutch as favourites. And I think their kind of best hope would have been to pull a kind of what Afghanistan did over England, which is exactly what they did, to be honest. They followed the blueprint pretty much exactly. And yeah, like a third of the way into the match, I think someone put a message saying it's a dud game, let's find other things to talk about. And then it just came alive. Like South Africa at the death were pretty bad with the ball, but Roelof van der Merwe and Scott Edwards with that 8-wicket partnership, I think it was 64 runs off 30, 35, 37 balls, something like that. Yeah, just exceptional. And then to come in with the ball and blow them away like that. I mean, we thought South Africa might be a little bit vulnerable to being blown away at some point in the tournament with such a long tail. But I don't think any of us expected it to be the Netherlands who did it. But it's brilliant that they did it today. And it's such a good kind of story for the tournament that needs these kind of good stories to run through it.
We haven't quite worked out exactly what the permutations are yet. We'll talk about it over the next few days, I'm sure. But Scott Edwards, the Tonga-born Scott Edwards, was brilliant. He's got an excellent ODI record. He's known for being very good square of the wicket, but he was superb all round the ground. Simon asks, is Roelof van der Merwe the best South African all-rounder at the World Cup? That's one hell of a performance, not just with the bat, because that completely changed the whole feeling of the game, because it felt like South Africa, it felt like an inevitability. South Africa actually started really well with the ball. They created pressure, and then sort of from nowhere, you realise, actually, this is going to be a quite hard score to chase if Netherlands start well with the ball. And then van der Merwe, after changing the feeling of the game with the bat, then sort of got the game under Dutch control quite early on in the South Africa run chase.
Yeah, I mean, he's possibly the only South African all-rounder at the World Cup, to be honest. But yeah, he's just brilliant to watch, isn't he? And everything he does, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And genuinely, it was probably the worst bit of the game for the Netherlands when that catch was dropped on the boundary off, was it Klaassen or Miller or someone? And Roelof van der Merwe just curled up fetus style on the pitch in kind of agony at this catch being dropped. But yeah, he's brilliant. And it's kind of the complete all-round performance to come in when everything seems to be lost and come and have that partnership and whack those sixes. And then first ball of his spell, he got a wicket. Second over, he got a wicket. And he turned the game around. And without him, the Netherlands wouldn't be in the position they were in. So yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, amazing.
A bit like Afghanistan, I think the Dutch have really quite decent bowling attack, especially in conditions that give the spinners a bit of assistance. I like how the seamers bowled really straight. They're very disciplined, gave away very few freebies, and tactically as well, getting the spin on early. South Africa were bogged down even before the first wicket. We had a question in from Keshav who asked, how impressed have we been with Edwards' captaincy. I think he's been really good, very calm, constantly consulting that cheat sheet that O'Dowd had. And yeah, the way they went spin heavy at the start was pivotal in the end. South Africa had a mountain to climb after falling to 44 for 4. And then in Van Meeker and Van Beek, De Leader, Dutt, Ackerman and Van der Merwe, they have 6 properly good bowlers. And then, as you said, Van der Merwe's coming in at 9 and Dutt looked handy with a bat at 10. It's a very well balanced side, and Dutt was actually the only bowler not to get a wicket, but he set the tone. He was wicketless, but conceded just 19 off his 5 overs with his really quite fast spin. We've talked about Netherlands, but South Africa, one game after we start hyping them up as potential title challengers, succumb to one of their worst ever World Cup results. You touched on the death bowling briefly, but what went wrong for them?
Yeah, it just seemed like there was no kind of acknowledgement that what they were doing wasn't working. Like Katya in particular came in and bowled this kind of pace off, short of a length outside off that just kept getting slapped over these short boundaries at Dharamsala. And there was no kind of, I guess, leadership to come up and tell him, that's not your best option, not here. You're going to get absolutely carted doing that. And then Rabada and Ngidi also went for runs, bowling a similar sort of line, similar sort of length, similar sort of pace. So there was just no kind of, okay, this isn't working, let's go to plan B or plan C or whatever. Let's just try and do anything. Because at that point, they're 2 wickets away from bowling them out. It only takes 2 balls to end what was happening. And there was just kind of almost like accepting this is what's happening and we'll chase it down, which is almost a little bit like, well, England tried that and that didn't work, and you're not always going to be able to chase down whatever's set for you, especially not on a pitch that did a little bit. So yeah, it was just a bit weird, and we've kind of thought throughout the tournament or the short amount of the tournament so far that at some point South Africa are going to get taken apart at the death because their bowling attack doesn't look as strong or as well balanced as others in the tournament, that they're without Anrik Nortje, who obviously that's massive that he's not there, and Sisanda Magala was meant to be their death bowling specialist, and he's not there either. So they've had to kind of rejig where their bowlers are bowling. They've got Janssen and Ngidi taking the new ball before Rabada and Katya come in and bowl in the middle overs, but they don't really seem to have a plan at the death. And it'll be interesting to see where they go from here, because they haven't got many options to come in and replace them and shuffle their pack. They've got Lizard Williams, who I think conceded 64 off 8 overs in his only ODI cap so far, and they've got Fekhlakweo, who is not a death bowler. So yeah, they don't really have many options in that regard, and it's quite worrying for them going forward. I don't think it's panic stations yet for them. Like, they are still a good side, and coming into this game, we were saying how good they were, but there's just more reason to be a bit more conservative when saying, yeah, these batters are great, and they've got Rabada and they've got Maharaj and Sant Shamsi and all these players. They're a bit vulnerable to being taken apart, like we saw today.
Yeah, and I guess every team is capable of having an off day. But I guess what would worry me most from a South African point of view is the lack of flexibility towards the end, as you say, not to spot that the plan wasn't working, because it's all partly that's on the bowlers, but it's also around like there's a lot of people in that team who played a lot of cricket, and it's not just all on Bavuma. Markram and Miller are 2 very experienced IPL players. De Kock's a former captain himself. I remember there was a moment in one of the India games where Siraj bowled a Yorker, I think with the opposition 9 wickets down. It gets hit for 4, and Rohit's furious. India are completely on top in this game. Rohit walks over to Siraj and says, "No, I've set a field for you to bowl short." Next ball, Siraj bowls shorts and gets the wicket. But the point is, Sharma intervened, and there was no intervention today when things were going wrong for South Africa. And I wonder as well, we talk a lot about how strong the batting line is, and fairly so. It is really, really strong. But I think it is worth saying that a couple of weeks before the tournament, there were questions over would Van der Dussen actually make the 11 because his form this year has not been great. And he actually played probably the worst shot of the lot, reverse sweeping straight to point when they just lost 3 for 5 runs. And Bavuma's got an excellent ODI record, but there are question marks about his overall record in Asia. Across formats, it's poor. And today, he was 16 off 31 up top and got really bogged down against spin. And I wonder, that's going to be one of the benefits of this long tournament. It's almost like a 5-match test series where if a pattern develops, you you could get found out a bit, and that's something that I think Bavuma is going to have to come across a lot this tournament. I think teams are going to start with spin against him, and it was interesting actually that even when it was off spin towards him, I know he played that one shot over the infield that eventually went for 6, but he didn't take that many aggressive options against the off spin, which is supposedly his favoured matchup. And as we've been talking about all tournament, they've got Janssen as high as 7, which is probably a position too high for him.
I think it's worth saying though as well, South Africa have gone with this very concerted plan to back their specialists over like what England have done with these lower order all-rounders to try and solve 2 problems at the same time. South Africa have gone away from that and decided that they are going to back their specialist fast bowlers and their specialist batters to get the job done, and go with a very traditional lineup of 6 batters, a kind of all-rounder, and then your bowlers. And that has worked for them up until this point in the tournament. Really, it's worked for them very well over the last year. They've scored runs quicker than anyone else in the world this year. They've scored more runs on average per wicket than any other side in the world this year, and they have done really well, and that's different to what they've done before. They don't really have many options to change that. They've kind of just got to go with it at this point and hope it works out. And as we've seen on their day, that batting lineup is going to take apart any side in the world. They just have to really hope that they have their day for another 6 or 7 days in this tournament, and they don't have to, rely on Janssen and Maharaj to try and chase down a total when it really matters. Although the last wicket stand today showed that they can put off a result for a while.
Yeah, it's a result that makes this week's games even more interesting than they already were. After 3 rounds, there are only 2 unbeaten teams and only 1 side without a win. We'll be back tomorrow after New Zealand, Afghanistan. Thanks, Katya. Thanks for listening. And well done for getting through an extra long episode today.